There is a song of freedom, and it is moving and stirring in the hearts of all humanity right here, right now, and it's moving in this sanctuary. It's moving in this community, yes? It is an uncommon life. It is a life uncommon that is calling for expression, that maybe it's been forgotten, but it will be reawakened. And let it be reawakened here today. I'm ready and willing to listen to the song. Say that with me. I'm ready and willing to listen. Oh, I'm not too sure that that's the most passionate. I think I might listen. No, I'm ready and I'm willing to listen to the song. Together, I'm ready and willing to listen to the song. Now more than ever, this world needs people like us who understand unity, who understand that darkness can be overcome by turning on a light and by being the light. We must listen, and then we must sing it. And you may have never sung before, but today is going to be the challenge to sing that song. The song that Tara just sang is a call. It is a challenge to leave the ordinary behind and to create the extraordinary life. And we can't wait for somebody else to do it. A lot of people are waiting, well, why don't they do something? Why don't they do something? Why doesn't God send somebody? Yes, God did send somebody. God sent you in your skin, in your experience, in your mind, in your heart to change the planet. To step out of the common practices, the common accepted practices that seem to be dotting the landscape of our earthly existence today and live as the uncommon portal and vibration and avenue through which something higher and holier, a higher vibration comes to fruition. Not tomorrow, not the next day, but today. And not just for ourselves. A lot of people are walking around the planet thinking, I'm just doing it for myself. No, we are doing it for the planet, for the human race. You're doing it for the people sitting next to you right now that are listening to the same song. And when your cadence and my rhythm come together, something beautiful begins to happen, and there's power. And there's power in this room today. And we are the ones that are called to dance, to sing, and to be the change we want to see. A few quotes before I bring my panel up here today. Let's read them together. Don Quixote is one of my heroes. And he's been told, everyone told him he's crazy, he's nuts. And maybe he was a little nuts, but he also created transformation. Let's read it together. They call me mad, seeking treasure where there is only trash. But perhaps maddest of all is to see the world as it is and not as it can be. Perhaps maddest of all is to just sing the refrain that everybody else is singing on the planet and not bring that uncommon song, that forgotten song, into the experience. Second quote, Friedrich Nietzsche, another hero, said this, and those that were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. Anybody ever call you nuts? Or anybody ever call you a Pollyanna? You can't possibly make a difference, yet you are the very person that can make a difference on the planet. One idea, one thought, one action at a time. You are called to be that shift and that change. Let's make it a little bit more personal, because there's nothing easy about this. They're going to call you crazy and they're going to call you nuts. Dance anyway. There's nothing easy. Let's go to the next two quotes. Let's read them together from Brian Stevenson. Always do the right thing, even when the right thing is the hard thing. Oh, I know so many people that have this great attitude. Yes, I'm going to change the planet, but it just got difficult, and it just got hard, and maybe I'll do it tomorrow. And then Robert Schuller. Yes, Robert Schuller is going to be quoted from the Unity North Platte, from the Crystal Cathedral, but I think this is absolutely true. Let's read it together. The truth of the matter is that you always know the right thing to do. The hard part is doing it. The Life Uncommon is a song of freedom and unity that is calling you out. It's calling us out. It's calling us up to a higher level, and it is calling us to action. Our fifth unity principle is the truth that I know, the oneness that I know is the truth and the oneness that I demonstrate. I use my body, I use what I have been given here on earth to transform not just the internal world, but the external world as well. And that means courage and bravery and guts and being called crazy, and it means doing the right thing even when it is uncomfortable. Yes? We are being called to be the ones to knock down the walls and build bridges. To not just knock them down, kick the walls down and build a bridge of understanding. To be the ones that are knocking down the blocks and constructing bridges of understanding, of compassion and connection. extraordinary bridges of understanding and connection and embracing the uncommon and making it the norm. It may feel hopeless and helpless, but as long as you entertain the light in your mind, and as long as you nurture the light in your heart, it is not hopeless. That seed was planted in your heart by the power and presence that chose to do business as you. And our job is to nurture that light and to step into it fully and completely and know that your hope, not just living on the inside, but the person next to you, your left and your right, needs that same hope. And what we find out is, wow, you're thinking the same thing I am. We need to change something. The common life is not working anymore. We need the uncommon experience to lend our voices to the sounds of freedom, as the song said. To let our words be words that uplift, empower, nurture, and unite, and not tear down. If you notice the world right now, the common life is it's just easy to put words on Facebook, put it on Instagram, put it on TikTok that tear down. Go to any grocery store, go to any restaurant, there are a lot of words that are tearing down the other. In unity, there are no others. We belong to each other. And we like the idea that, look around the room, there's only one of us here. There is only one of us here. Say that with me. There is only one of us. That's an uncommon idea. That's a very uncommon idea, but now the world needs it more than ever. Ours is to dance our prayers into expression, give feet to our prayers. To give feet and give voice and to give action to the songs that are singing on the inside of our heart, a song of freedom, unity, compassion, and love, and to do the right thing by offering our whole selves, not a piece, not when it's easy or comfortable, to offer our whole selves to the life that is transcendent, transformative, and uncommon. Yes? And by doing so, what we do is we replace what is. We agree that what is doesn't appear to be working really well. We replace what is with the treasure of what can be, of what must be. And actually, if we stay true to the song, what will be. Unity North held a class in the earlier part of this year called Be the Bridge. It's a book and a study by Tasha Morrison that basically calls out the racial divides that live in our country, in our nation, in our world, in our humanity, and in the hearts of many people in our citizenry. It does not play small with calling it out. And we did not play small with calling it out either by getting honest and open and receptive to what needs to be healed in our own hearts. Today, I have a panel of people, bridge builders, if you will, who participated in that powerful discourse. And they wanted to make sure, every one of them, that conversation didn't die after 10 weeks. For 10 weeks, they devoted their life to the uncomfortable conversations. 10 weeks to the uncomfortable situations and calling it out, to put it out in front of us, and let's look at it so that we can heal it and move forward from it. But there are many more than the panelists, the 6 panelists that we have today. I'm going to invite the panelists to make their way up. But anybody else who took part in those conversations, I'm going to invite you to please stand. Because I want to personally applaud you. If you were part of this class, please stand up. And let the rest of us, standing on your shoulders, acknowledge the goods. Please remain standing. It took courage, it took guts, it took conviction, and it took commitments. Please stay standing, because I want this scripture to be directed to the people that are up here on the platform, to those of you in the room, those of you online that took part. This comes from the book of Isaiah, and I want you to read this with me, because these are the people that are leading the charge of the song and the dance together. And those from among you will rebuild the ancient ruins. You will raise up the age-old foundations, and you will be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets. Important work. Thanks for standing. I acknowledge each and every one of you for not just letting a scripture be a scripture that feels good, not letting Sunday morning be a feel-good experience, and then we go back out into the world and we're singing the old common song, and we're not addressing what needs to be addressed. So I have a series of questions for the 6 panelists. These are people that I consider my friend. These are people that I respect and honor for their bravery and their courage and their willingness to make sure that the conversation of Be the Bridge does not end at 10 weeks. but it becomes a new ministry here at this church in one form, another, many forms perhaps. And so you know most of them, but we have Tara who just sang, and Michael, Danielle, who is the rock star on Sunday mornings, Sabrina, who is the co-lead with Michael of this new ministry that's emerging, Rebecca, a member of our board of directors, and of course you all know the goddess of the universe, April. And so I'm going to ask them some questions, and I'm going to invite you. There's pieces of paper in your seat back. As questions come up for you, this is going to be just a touch, a taste of what we did for 10 weeks. We're going to continue the dialogue Wednesday night, and we're going to invite you to ask your questions, to put them on that paper, and we'll be collecting them in this basket here after the service. We will address them on Wednesday night at our meditation service and our dialogue, and if we don't get to all the questions, we will continue the work Wednesdays afterwards, because it's important. So first question is basically, why did you sign up for a class? Obviously, you knew that there was going to be some tension, some uncomfortableness, and it might be difficult. What was the motivation to sign up for such a class where we talk about the racial divides of our country? Who's first?
I guess I'll go first. So for me, honestly, I heard about it, and I was like, I believe in equality, I believe in diversity, and I didn't think about it, and I signed up. And I was like, oh, and I get in there, and the harder part for me was learning to sit and lean into discomfort, allow myself to feel uncomfortable while other people shared experiences and stories with me that maybe I didn't know, and that were painful. And so learning to sit in that and lean in that, stay in that, not run, not shy away, not hide in shame, not get defensive, but just simply to be in that space and allow it to unfold. That was the challenge. That was the challenge for me. Yeah, and as a board member, I also think that it's important that we not only say that we believe in diversity and equality and oneness and all of this, but that we do it, that we act on it, we embrace it, we make the changes we need to. So answer that from personal as well as, the role I have in this church. So thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. So Michael, I think you're next.
Yes. I grew up in a family, in a community that didn't know anything about building bridges, especially building bridges with people who didn't look like us. When those people started moving into our neighborhood, we moved. We did the white flight thing. I went to an all-white Christian school, went to an all-white Southern Baptist church, and the only mention of race was using words that were hateful and divisive. And that's what I grew up with. And then when I went and became an adult and decided with my former spouse to form a family, we didn't have biological children, we adopted them. And those children just happened to have brown skin. And those people that I grew up with didn't understand, and they thought I was crazy. And they didn't want to build a bridge with my children, and all we wanted to do was be a family and be loving. And so when Chet Bertoli stood up at Bit of Unity and he said, we're going to do a Build the Bridge class, I said, oh yeah, let's do this thing, because I want to learn more about how to build those bridges, because I have my own pain about the bridges that weren't built, but I want to be about how can I help build bridges. So I'm just so excited that the class took place and that everybody that was there, and I got to interact with these beautiful people. And yes, there was discomfort like Rebecca talked about. It's not a comfortable thing to talk about in some contexts, but as Richard said, we are all one. We may happen to look a little bit different, but we are all part of the same beautiful spiritual reality. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So, as we talk about, we've done a lot of this kind of work for the last 10 years in this church, and we've addressed it, and we've had conversations about it, and then the conversation ends, and then we go back into the common world. And maybe there's been a slight change in the individual, but really haven't elicited a collective change. We haven't really been as powerful a voice as we could have been. So my next question to you all is, why is it important that you have devoted yourself to the formation of a new ministry here at church to keep the dialogue going. What keeps you committed to the work, and why is it important that we don't stop after 10 weeks?
When I think about that question, as I've been thinking about it this week, I was reminded of Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements, and he brings up the indigenous principle of 7 generations, of thinking about the actions that we take and how they affect our world 7 generations from now. So when I answer that question of why do I stay in the work, why do I think it's important for us to stay in the work, I remove myself from the equation. So yes, I teach classes and I do workshops, but I do that for 7 generations from now, because there's a commitment from myself to help 7 generations from now.
Sabrina, next, Tara.
So I thought that I was doing the work for a long time until it was made real to me, made clear to me about 9 or 10 years ago that I could go deeper. And it was made in a pretty harsh way, but it woke me up. It made me realize, like, there's so much more I don't know. And so I decided to do that work at a deeper level on a regular basis. I started taking classes and workshops and reading books and watching movies that I might not have watched or read prior to that moment. And so the reason that not only did I take this class, but that I will continue to do this work on a daily basis all the time is because I want to create a reality that my son doesn't have to think about it as much as I do, but he's thinking about it because it's a part of his consciousness. I want people to recognize that it's okay to have this conversation. It's okay to lean into the discomfort. And so I'm going to keep doing this work no matter what, and I am going to always have the hard conversations. I'm always going to be the person that I'm going to put myself in a situation where somebody's going to ask me a question that I might not know the answer to, and I'm going to stumble through it. But this work is so essential to all of our healing, in my opinion, and I feel like it's just essential that I continue doing the work and be an example of what that can look like.
Sabrina?
So I had to think about why I do this work and why I continue. And when I thought about my story. And I remember in 3rd grade in West Palm Beach, they integrated the schools. And I went and found a wonderful classmate, Susan, and I would meet every morning at the top of the stairs right before you line up and march into the school. And that went on for weeks till I went one morning and I couldn't find Susan. So I walked around, I found her with a group of white students, and I said, Susan, you're not at the door. And she said, I know. I said, well, what happened? And she says, well, my mom said I can't play with you anymore. She looked, and I said, well, why? Well, she couldn't explain it. We're 3rd grade, and I didn't understand it. It was the first time for me. All I knew, and she knew, we no longer could be friends. That's what we understood. So that was the first time I understood what racism felt, what bigotry could mean, and could affect something as pure as just engaging with people. So when I think about why I do this work, because I believe that I should be able to reach across the aisles. I believe to this day that hurt for that Susan, no other child should experience that their hope, their joy, or just meeting someone that don't look like them. We didn't realize it wasn't a color issue for us. We just liked each other. That's why I do this work, because this is what is still going on. So I will continue to do this work. I will continue to show up in spaces. So for all the Susans and little brown and white girls that suddenly just have friends, all the races that suddenly that's snatched away from them. And I'll to this day remember my Susan. And I always think when I say her name, I hope that the love and the purity that we have, that she is walking through the world and extending her hand still across the aisles. So that's why I will always do this work, and I will always show up, no matter what.
Thank you, Sabrina. Appreciate it. That's just one story. In this class, there was story after story after story that made you have the same reaction that you just had. Ooh. That's the common life that we live in today. And have we come a little bit? Maybe. Have we got a long ways to go? Absolutely. So my answer to this question is, why would a unity church devote an entire church service to this idea? Because the common life is dishonoring the presence of God that we teach and we know from this platform. It is dishonoring the unity movement, the founders of the unity movement that saw that bridges could be built. To not have this conversation, however uncomfortable it might be, is doing a disservice to God, to our movement, to this community that stands for unity and diversity as partners. So that's why we continue it. I want to define some of the terms, have the panel define, because there's some terms, if you got to have a common knowledge, a common language in order to get to the end result. And so I'm going to ask you to define the word racism for us. I don't know which one you had it. Michael, was it you?
So the Oxford Dictionary defines racism as prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or is marginalized. The secondary definition is the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. So there's a couple of different things in here. There is the personal racism that is about, I see you, I don't like you, I don't want you to have the same advantages I have, I'm going to talk badly about you, that type of thing we're familiar with. The other is institutional or systemic racism, which is kind of concrete systems that have been built over time and have perhaps shifted. If you've ever seen the movie 13th by Ava DuVernay, it talks about the different ways in which racism continues to raise its ugly head through Jim Crow laws, through redlining, through mass incarceration, all these types of things, and it is pervasive. It is still here, even though we want to think that it's not. Well, slavery happened a long time ago. Racism does still exist, especially on the systemic or institutional level in this country.
Another term that we spent a lot of time dialoguing in this class was the term unconscious bias. And I'd like Avril to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, as a meditation and mindfulness instructor, this is a term that I really appreciated, that was becoming more revealed to mainstream culture. But the idea of unconscious bias is that every experience that we've had, well, first of all, our senses are limited. And I mentioned this in the earlier talk, that if you think about the idea of vision, you know, a lot of us wear glasses, right? So can you really say that what you're seeing outside of you is accurate? Think about the visual advantage of a hawk, you know, or how we've created instruments now to see really, really, really tiny things, smaller than electrons, and things that are light years away. So when we say I'm seeing something and we're relying on that, that's very, very poor evidence for anything outside. But then secondly, that our reality as we are experiencing it at the point of the individual is very much shaped by our experiences. So for example, I was raised on the Eastern Seaboard in New York. So I have a very, very different view of my childhood than maybe if I'd been raised in Mississippi or in Oregon, right? And I am a biological female who identifies with being a female. So I'm experiencing reality through that lens. I'm a mom, so I'm experiencing reality through a lens. I have an advanced degree. All of these things, none of them are bad. Was anything I said bad? No, but it does occlude my experience of reality. I'm going to see something very differently through that lens that has all that coloring in front of it. And that's actually the word the yogis use for it, klesha, the coloring that shapes things. And so the first step to transcending unconscious bias is acknowledging that you have a limited perspective and a limited view of the world, and that you're getting lots of things like subliminal and subconscious messages from things like institutional racism and entertainment, you know, like the things like with the Olympics, like black people are runners and not gymnasts. Well, look at this year, right? And I was a gymnast, and I was the only chip in the cookie for many, many years. So, you know, that bias, and I want you to laugh because I want you to know this isn't an accusatory conversation. You're my family and I love you, and we're having a different experience on this planet.
The lens that the common people have worn, had on for years and years and years. Jesus came 2,000 plus years ago to say, it's time to take the glasses off, or at least remove them for a moment so you can have a conversation. He changed the face of the planet. He changed the direction of the planet by simply saying, there's a different way to look. There's a different perspective that you can have, and there was nothing comfortable about him doing that. And there will not be anything comfortable about us channeling our own Christ to say, let me suspend my lens for a moment. Let me lovingly call out those who have a lens on when they make an ignorant comment. And let's remove the glasses for a minute, and let's start at square one, that we belong to each other. Another term that we used during this class that was uncomfortable for many people who looked like me was the word privilege. I'd like Tara to speak about that.
Can we first just take a little bit of a deep breath together? And the reason I asked for us to do that is because my heart rate goes a little bit faster whenever we're talking about things that so many people want to just attack and become very defensive. And so privilege is one of those words. And the thing that we learn the deeper we dive into this kind of work is that we all have some form of privilege. Every single one of us do. And so if you can drive a car, that's a privilege. If you can read, that's a privilege. If you have clothes, that's a privilege that some people don't have. And so when we say privilege, we're not saying you're a bad person because you have a certain amount of privilege that someone else doesn't have. It's recognizing that we have that privilege. When we recognize that the privilege that we carry as individuals may not be the same privilege as someone sitting next to us, then that gives us an ability to kind of open our perspective and also breathe a little bit better without holding our breath or clenching our teeth or our shoulders because somebody brought up the word privilege. And so one simple example that I started learning when I was taking the classes that I started taking is that when I go to the grocery store with my child and he's sitting in the cart and he asks for a treat or snack, and I open a package and I hand him that snack, that is a privilege that I have as a white woman that a black woman may not have with her child because she may be chased down in the store or accused of stealing. I'm not going to be accused of stealing, and I take it for granted. So we stopped opening packages in the store, and I explained to my son, this is why we don't open packages anymore. So if we're going to eat a snack, let's eat it in the car before we go in the store, because the privilege that we have is not the same privilege that some of your friends have that are a different color. So the only concept that we need to understand about privilege is that we all have it, and we have to recognize what that means when we take advantage of a privilege that someone else doesn't have.
And this is so important because as a very empathic person, I instantly feel people start to experience things like guilt about that. And this isn't about that. This is about helping you to get clarity in the lens in which you see the world. It's not like I don't have privilege too. I've mentioned having an advanced degree. Someone in our class pointed out that I grew up in a very socioeconomically advantaged home. When I was in India recently, I had children begging me on the street. And I was like, wow, it's just so interesting. Someone's coming up to me and assuming that I would have money to give to them just being American and touring.
When I began to make peace with suspending any guilt I might have about being a white heterosexual male, I began to see that privilege was not an accusation, it was just a fact and a reality, and I could begin to have more understanding eyes, certainly more understanding ears, and then oneness began to emerge, the goal of unity, oneness. The defense, the deflect, the guilt were all emotions that got in the way of the conversation. And so I'm blessed for the moment that I was able to suspend things that were blocks and put a bridge down instead. One of the words we spent some time with was the word reconciliation. Reconciliation. I'd like Danielle to speak a little bit about that.
So first, a shout out to Reverend Richard and his love of etymology. We're gonna do that a little bit. So reconciliation has Latin roots, and it means to make good again or to repair. You don't repair something that's not in need of repair. You don't make something good again that's already whole. So in order to achieve any kind of reconciliation, you have to first acknowledge the past and current injustices that have been done in whatever area that you're looking for reconciliation to happen. You have to acknowledge the ongoing impact of past actions and how those are still being felt and how they still affect us psychologically in our interpersonal actions. And even as Michael was defining racism and talking about different levels of it, you've got a systemic or an ideological level. That's the huge one, right? So system of law, system of medicine, and the oppressions and injustices that can happen there. You've got another level, which is institutional. We might have practices here at Unity North that are oppressive, but that are different than another institution across the street. You've got interpersonal actions between people or groups of people, and then even the internalized oppression, where you start to believe the negative messages that are being said about different parts of your identity. So when you're looking for playing a role in reconciliation, you can play a role on any of those levels, but know that the bigger the level, the more people that you need to surround yourself in order to make success. You really have to think about the social. In social justice, it's not about you or you or you, it's about us working together for reconciliation.
Which brings us to this next question. This work is calling us to be mindful, individually and collectively, with the common life as we know it and what exists in our field. And it's much too easy in this field to say, well, they're not talking about me. Yet we teach oneness. There's only one of us in the room, without realizing that we are perpetuating and contributing to systems of oppression unknowingly. It doesn't mean that we're bad or awful people. We're just unconsciously contributing to the systems. So I want to know what your thoughts are about the universal mindset that is pervasive in our nation, in our world, in our humanity, that believes it's about everybody else. It's about everybody else. It's their problem. It's not me. I'm not that.
So, you know, we love the word mindfulness here. Like, this is a mindfulness inhaling community. But it's not just about mindfulness because I want to be relaxed or mindful of my anxiety. If there's really only one of us here, we have to be mindful of all that's going on, as much as it's painful and uncomfortable. In Qigong, we have this exercise that we call pressing down the muck. And you can't press it down if you don't acknowledge that you're in it. So we say things like, oh, that's not my president, or that's not my government, or I didn't vote for that. It is your president, your government, your country, you're an American, you live here. And if you don't get it, thank you. We are all part of the mess, and we're all part of the solution. There's nobody who's removed from it if they're alive and participating in anything. You know, I know people, I can go live off the grid. Well, that's part of it. You know, like, we are in it. We're in it, we're in it, we're in it. Now, how we all choose to deal with it is different. But the idea of bringing mindfulness to this is acknowledging that we're part of the problem, but we don't have to keep being part of the problem, right? Like, once you're awake to something, what is it? You know better, you do better. End of discussion. So now I know that maybe certain companies make clothing that's made in sweatshops and I don't buy it anymore, right? That's a big, powerful impact. There's so many things that we can do at that level. Just once we know, we don't do it anymore.
We teach in this community that we live as a singularity. As individuals, we're cells within the body of one energy, one focus, one light, one love. Call it God. So therefore, if we're all coexisting on this planet as one energy of God expressed in many different forms, there is no private good. My good is your good, because we're sharing that energy. But in that is also the recognition that my suffering is also your suffering, and your suffering is also my suffering. Once again, it honors the body that is God, the body that is the unity movement. To not have these conversations and these dialogues on a Sunday morning, on a Wednesday night, or a meditation, wherever it might be, is a disservice to what this church stands for. And so, yes, we're going to go ahead and continue the work, which is my final question for the panel. How do we continue to heal the divide? If what we've done here stays in this room and we all go out and we're back in the common life, not making a change, it's been a waste of your time. But what we've done here, if what we've done here goes out those doors and we're a little bit more conscious and aware, it's been the most valuable hour you could have spent. So how do we continue the work? What is next? What can we do as a collective, as a community, and as individuals to make sure that the healing continues? We'll just go there and come this way.
So what we do moving forward is we take within ourselves what is mine to do. This for me, it's to ask what is mine to do. And what is mine to do is to simplify the conversation as much as possible while putting myself in the conversation. So I'm going to keep taking classes. I'm going to keep watching the movies that help me understand this whole conversation. I'm going to read the books. I'm going to share the information with other people. And if somebody's telling a joke that's very uncomfortable, that doesn't feel right in my heart, instead of going along with the joke, I ask them, why is this funny? You know, just ask a simple question, because I'm not going to say, "Oh, that's ugly. Don't say that. That's stupid," because I'm creating separation. But if I say, "Why is that funny?" then they have to think about it. And maybe they stop telling the joke, or they go and tell it to somebody else, but then I let them know in a healthy, gentle way that I'm not gonna hold space for that kind of information or that kind of energy. So that's what I'm gonna do moving forward, and I would ask that you maybe consider doing any one of those things as well.
For me, as someone who has kind of an activist mindset, I think it's taking action and calling out racism where we see it. Not just in those individual conversations, which it's been very important to do, but to work with people who are fighting racism, to work with people who are in a larger arena saying, this is not what America stands for. I think of Representative Jones in Tennessee. He's in the Tennessee State Legislature. An amazing activist, and in the face of a whole lot of stuff that comes at him every day, he reminds me a lot of Dr. King and how he's just willing to say, this will not stand. This is not who we are. This is not who the people of my district elected me to come and do. I will take a stand right here and right now, and sometimes I think that's the most important thing we can do.
Last week, real quick, we said we got to up our game. We got to up our game, and that's just going to the next level. And the levels that we talk about here in this community are being an ally, then moving to being an advocate, then to being an activist, and then not letting somebody of color lead the way. I'm going to be an accomplice. Get behind me, because I'm going to lead the way to this. Just one step is all we're asking today. Danielle.
You heard the word discomfort used quite a few times in this service, and it came up in first service quite naturally as well. So I would say what's next is to lean into the discomfort. It's a part of the process. If you are going to commit yourself to calling people in or calling people out when they say something racist, you're going to encounter discomfort. If you're going to learn about yourself and your own biases so you can start to reduce them and clean that lens so you can see the world in a different way, you're going to encounter discomfort. Whatever you're going to do, writing letters, protesting, protesting, being a part of a movement, there is discomfort, and I don't say that in a threatening way. I say that as from a place of awareness, so that when you encounter the discomfort, you can check in with your body. Where is this discomfort coming from, and how do I move through it? It's not an obstacle to stop you. It is something to make you pause, take that breath, and move forward. And again, not by yourself, with your community.
Beautiful. Sabrina?
The question came up in one of our groups, where do I begin? It feels overwhelming. It's such a big issue. And all of that's true. Racism is a very big issue. So I always say, to me, it's like the bite of the elephant. You take one piece at a time. Do what you can do, whatever that looks like for you, okay? Find that alignment within yourself and that voice to be able to step into, say, well, you know what? If it's acknowledging that somebody came through the door with something and you're like, okay, wait a minute, did you hold the door for me, or did you just assume that that was be okay? If it's having a hard conversation, if it's listening to someone else that you can tell is uncomfortable and making them feel safe to have that conversation, okay? Start where you are. That's the easiest thing to do. We gave a lot of language, we gave a lot of verbiage, and that's always a lot. But start where you are. And remember that everybody makes a difference. That one thing that you do can make a difference. That one conversation you can have with the person that they can be to drive you crazy. It's like, why do you think this way? But the conversation consistently sometimes changes their mind. It opens their eyes. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But you know what? It's the drop on the stone. If you keep at it, it changes it. That's what I always take away.
Thank you.
I like that you use the drop on the stone, because I was getting the visualization of like drops in a bucket. You know, it's like, okay, one thing I do is probably not going to change the world, so should I not do it? Or should I do it? And that's one drop in the bucket. And then maybe if you put some drops in the bucket and you put some drops in the bucket, like this bucket at some point is going to fall over or fill up or overflow. You know, so it's everything matters. Everything counts. You know, I think of things I can do personally, like educating myself, putting myself in conversations that feel uncomfortable and not running away, asking hard questions when it's appropriate, you know, making myself approachable, because some of the biggest things that have made differences in my life have been people who were courageous enough to say, Rebecca, what you just said, I don't think that's what you meant, you know, or are you sure that's what you want to say, you know, because I'm a pickle in a pickle jar, you know, like, I mean, I can't be a cucumber again, you know, like, right? I mean, you know, I'm trying, I want to be the cucumber, but I'm in an institution that's been founded on racial inequality. So like, I'm not going to be just completely innocent, and I can't pretend to be. But when I see it, you know, when somebody calls something out, I'm like, thank you. Thank you so much for trusting me enough to share that with me. Oh my gosh, that's huge. You know, and then also like, I put myself in bigger and bigger spheres of influence. That's just what I do. But everybody has a sphere of influence, whether it's your family, your job, your kids' school, the board at church, you know, whatever it is. Look from a different perspective. Bring yourself outside of it, look from the outside. If I was a different race, a different sexual orientation, a different whatever, I mean, you can put anything in that box and say, would I still feel comfortable with these decisions being made? So there's so many things.
April?
Oh my goodness. And it's amazing how different it is from first service, you know, like that's been interesting too. So you can, you know, it's worth coming to 2 services every Sunday. One is that the idea of, so everything here was very much to me actions, that when I think of action, I just mean like out in the world, but you also have to have the introspection. You have to do both. You can't just introspectively sit in a cave. And there's a place for that, but this isn't the place for that. And so it takes a lot of, I called it dusting off the lens. Remember I talked about the bias? But you have to dust every day because it just reaccumulates. So what are you doing to actually challenge your perspectives, the way you're seeing reality? and not taking it personally that the way that you see it may be you may be supporting things that are hurting other people. Not taking that personally. And so that's why we have these malas, right? We say we're doing this practice of the 100 days of peace, 100 days of prayer, 100 days of japa or pancha, now you messed me up. Purusharna, panchakarma is something else. Purusharna. And the idea is every time you do this, it's like a little bit of Windex on that dusty crystal that tomorrow's going to have a bunch of dust on it again. So it's not fruitless. You just keep doing it.
Can I throw in one more thing?
We're getting out of time.
It was just about the kids. Just remember to share
go quick.
things like this with your kids. Give them books that they may not read out of school because of the way that school is taught is very kind of whitewashed in a way. And so give your children opportunities to learn as they're growing up different perspectives. That was all I wanted to add.
I want to encourage you, the next step is to join this panel and some of the others that were in the class this Wednesday evening. We're going to continue the dialogue. And we want you to bring your questions. This basket is for your questions before you leave. Put them in here and we will address them this Wednesday night. But show up and then be a part of the next thing. We don't know what the next thing is going to be. One of the things we've talked about is our small group ministry is starting again in the fall. And I believe we're going to have 1 or 2 groups that mirror what we've just done with Be the Bridge. It won't be a book study, but it will be a commitment to having these kinds of conversations here in our community.